Presenting a short summary of Chapter 7, Earth's Environmental Systems and Geological Systems about how Earth works. This is
Grace,
Eric,
Sukhmani,
Julia,
and Loren.
Within an environment, there is a system-network relationship among parts, elements, or components that all interact with and influence one another through the exchange of energy, matter, or information. A system receives inputs, and these inputs provide outputs, and an example of this is the Gulf of Mexico, which receives inputs of fresh water, sediments, nutrients, and pollutants from rivers. Meanwhile, fishermen harvest the Gulf system outputs, which are matter and energy in the form of shrimp and fish.
a negative feedback loop output that results from a system moving in one direction acts as input that moves the system in the other direction. The input and output neutralize each other's effects, stabilizing the system. An example of this is when humans get cold. They shiver, creating heat. On the other hand, positive feedback loops are when the input and output drive the system further toward one extreme or another. Similar to the spread of cancer, when cells multiply out of control in a self-accelerating process.
Dynamic equilibrium is when processes within a system move in opposing directions at equivalent rates so their effects balance out. Homeostasis is the tendency of a system to maintain constant or stable internal conditions. Emergent properties are characteristics not evident in the components alone. An example of this is how a tree's emergent properties include the elements of the forest ecosystem, CO2 sink, and habitat, but the components are leaves, branches, and the trunk.
Nitrogen can come from animal manure, nitrogen-fixing crops, sewage treatment facilities, and street runoff. Phytoplankton includes photosynthetic algae, protists, and cyanobacteria which drift near the surface. The waste products and zooplankton go to the bottom of the ocean and provide food for organisms. A dead zone is created when decomposers consuming oxygen cause oxygen concentrations in the lower ocean waters to drop, killing shrimp and fish. Eutrophication is a process of nutrient over-enrichment, excessive blooms of algae, increased production of organic matter, and subsequent ecosystem degradation.
The lithosphere is the rock and sediment beneath our feet, while the atmosphere is composed of the air surrounding our planet. The hydrosphere is all water, such as freshwater, ice, liquid vapor, and the biosphere is the total of all the planet's living organisms and the abiotic portions of the environment with which they interact.
The physical processes of geology determine Earth's landscape and form the foundation for the biotic patterns that overlay the landscape. The rocks and minerals that create the Earth's landscape are heated, melted, cooled, broken down, and reassembled in a very slow process called the rock cycle. At a high enough temperature, rocks will enter a molten liquid state called magma. If magma is released from the lithosphere, possibly through a volcanic eruption, it may flow or spatter across the Earth's surface as lava, which will form igneous rock when the magma cools. Magma that cools slowly while it is well below Earth's surface is known as intrusive igneous rock, like granite. When magma is ejected from a volcano, it cools quickly, so minerals have little time to differentiate into clusters known as extrusive igneous rocks.
Particles of rock blown by wind or washed away by water finally come to rest downhill, downstream, or downwind from their sources to form sediments. Sedimentary rock is formed when dissolved minerals seep through sediment layers and act as a kind of glue, crystallizing and binding sediment particles together. The formation of rock through these processes of compaction, binding, and crystallization is known as lithification. Similar processes of physical compaction and chemical transformation create the fossils of organisms and the fossil fuels we use for energy.
When great heat or pressure is exerted on rocks, they may change their form and become metamorphic rock. The rock cycle takes place within the broader context of plate tectonics, a process that underlies earthquakes, volcanoes, and determines the geography of the Earth's surface. The Earth's surface consists of a lightweight, thin crust of rock, floating atop a malleable mantle, which surrounds a molten, heavy core made mostly of iron.
Today's continents were joined together in the landmass Pangaea about 225 million years ago. The continents were formed through divergent, transform, and convergent plate boundaries.
Divergent plate boundaries occur when magma surging upward to the surface divides plates and pushes them apart, creating new crust as it cools and spreads. This can be seen from the mid-Atlantic ridge plates, expanding outward from divergent plate boundaries as mid-ocean ridges bump against other plates. Transform plate boundaries occur when two plates slip and grind alongside one another, like the San Andreas Fault. Convergent plate boundaries may cause one plate of crust to slide under another in a process called subduction.
Thank you for watching this short summary of Earth's environmental systems and geological systems about how Earth works. We hope it helps.
gonna make it right. 뭔가 더 나아질 거야.